Welcome to the Gnarly Girls podcast.
What's up, gnarly beings?
This is a loose-lipped, unfiltered, raw-dogging, stripping down of culture.
No fucks, no panties. This is a labia of love.
We're your hosts, Tony Naj
and Serafina Supernova. And this is Gnarly Girls.
I wish we did coke before we talked about self-care.
It's really funny.
That feels correct. All right. Self-care in a careless world. Gnarly Girls episode. How are you, Sarah?
I'm doing all right.
I, too, am doing all right.
Wait, that felt like a really disembodied response, you know?
Yours or mine?
No. Mine.
Oh, yeah.
But then you also copying me, yes.
Well,
how many times do people ask us, how are you? And you're like, I'm doing all right. I'm okay. I say that a lot. I feel like you also say, I'm okay.
No, what I think my classic response is, how are you doing? I think I actually do say how I'm doing.
I feel like you do say, I'm okay. I can
But
hear you
I
in my
am
brain.
okay.
No, I know, same. Also all right now.
I think if things are really bad, I'm going to say they're really bad. And I'm never going to be one that's like, great. I don't think I've ever been like, I am so good. Everything is perfect. Yeah, that's never come out of my mouth.
I mean, that's not a Capricorn's way of being.
No, there's no world in which I'm not ruminating and slightly upset and having deep concern. So I think okay to me is a compliment to my life.
Yeah.
Okay is the best it could possibly be.
Yeah.
All right. So I think something that I've been thinking about a lot when it comes to this concept of self-care in a careless world is I see two polarities of participation right now. One is people who are like, I'm going to completely disengage. I cannot involve myself in information right now. It is too much. I'm not going to do it because it's harming me as a person. Then I see the opposite extreme of I must know everything that's going on. I must be involved. I have to understand. And then there's a massive consumption. It's almost like an underconsumption of world events and then a overconsumption of world events. Do you agree? Is that what you're also seeing?
Yeah, I think that there's the ability to take in, I don't want to say like we have the ability to take in more information than we ever have as a human race. Never was there a time on planet Earth where technology was this advanced and we had access to this much information.
Who are you right now? And that is
it's anytime you ask, can the folks at home validate this for me? It's my own internal monologue, but also the monologue of the collective. I have heard this. I've seen this on memes.
over and over.
People talk about this.
It's a cliche at this point.
Anytime I do a voice, it is some form of collective voice that I am not separate from, you know, because I have considered that. Like, and I feel like I've even said that and then been like, wait, do I agree with that? Or is that something that I read? That we've never as a human race, humanity, been able to have this much information about global events at once. But then I'm like, but maybe
telepathy.
Right. And like, who knows about the technology of ancient civilizations and what information we don't have access to about that. So I think to think that
maybe
we're so special.
Yeah.
I mean, we are special, but to think that we're exceptional to, you know, we're having this experience that no human has ever had before is not giving us the authority and agency to choose how to be in relationship to actually the true gift of the amount of information that we have access to.
And I think what you're also referencing is that our human evolution, we assume, has only been an advancement of knowledge. What
From
there
cave
is,
person to AI.
yeah, but there is a possibility where we actually had a more advanced communication system in
Yeah.
the beginning.
Yeah.
Who says conversation is that advanced?
Who
I mean,
says the aliens didn't build the pyramids?
who,
Verdict's still out, you know?
but you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like we value verbal communication so much as if animals and their communication style isn't legitimate, even though whales are having communication, you know, tens and thousands of miles away from each other. They're communicating. I mean, don't quote me on those numbers, but there is communication that's happening through the animals, through the trees, through the wind. That is global. Like we're not, excuse us. We are not the only creatures having a global conversation.
Right. Right. I was really struck, not to bring up the telepathy tapes again, but I was really struck when one of the nonverbal autistic folks was talking about, I think they were describing the experience like through their letterboard to their mom about how they go to communicate like on this hill space and how that works. They reference the way that trees communicate with each other like through a root system. And when I've had a visual of like a network of consciousness, or when I like tap into that, like it does sort of feel very like tree root like, you know? Like yes, we can open up our phones and get information about what's happening across the world, but we can also access that without reading the information on a screen. But I do think then, since we do have that as an option, we just have to decide how we want to be in relationship to that.
And I think the main takeaway that we have to remember is we are not the only species having global communication. We never have been.
Yeah.
And so I think there is an arrogance when we assume that we're having this advanced communication purely because of this current manifestation of it. Global communication is ancient
Yeah.
and has been happening. So the other thing I really wanted to say, as something that I've kind of noticed with the archetypes or the personality types of either the under consumer of information or the over consumer, let's just talk about those extremes, because
Mhm.
obviously the answer is to find some sort of harmonic balance. That was my voice. But the,
Who was that?
who was that? That was people that, for me, the person that I was embodying in that moment is when people say the most obvious fucking advice when they're like, well, we're all one. It's like, yeah, no shit. Or like, yeah, well, we should all just feel compassion,
We
which
should
is
find a
also
balance.
me. We should find a balance. Yeah, duh. You know, like, and I think I'm always saying this stuff. And it's just like, if I were, again, like a Buddhist monk from 3,000 years ago, I'd be so irritated. I'd be like, what, you're still talking about finding balance? Like, what?
Right.
You're all one? Yeah, said it. Been there, done that. I would have a lot of ego as a 3,000-year-old monk.
Question.
Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself in either of those extremes, like in different moments and periods of life where you feel like you're either over invested in what's happening with you and you can't take in what's happening with the world, or over invested with what's happening in the world? Have you ever had both happening at the same time?
I
Like overstimulation station.
overstimulation station
A
is,
daily experience.
yeah, is a train I've taken. I tend to go to the global stimulation, although I am often very stimulated about my own life and my own chaos for sure. But this is what my current observation is, and I'll speak for myself when I'm in either extreme, is when I am, or I'm going to also speak about others because I see it a lot. When someone is very focused on avoiding the global stimulation and they're saying, like, I can't handle it, I'm not going to take it in. I find that oftentimes those people are hyper focused on their own lives, which is its own misery, and they're constantly talking about like a relationship drama, like a family drama. Their smaller world becomes a microcosm of the global chaos. So I would argue that you are not saving yourself from the global chaos by shielding information. You're just recreating it in your micro community. and in your mind with the people that are in your life directly. And then I would also argue that when you have the overconsumption of the global information, you are acting as if the microcosm of your own life isn't as chaotic as the global. There's this kind of like, I think there can be a personal bypassing that's done in the sense that maybe you're not having the energy or time or care or concern about your own personal life, and that the focus on the global chaos is a distraction from you dealing with the chaos of your own life. And it's like, how are we using both of these extremes as a distraction from deep and genuine self reflection? That is my current thesis.
Well, just to bring in like Buddhist monks, something that I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh's book. I don't know which one it was. I fucking forget. But he was talking about. I know.
How dare you use the name
I'm like
of Thich Nhat Hanh in vain?
I'm like breathing. Like what's I don't know. I can't remember the name of the book, but it really struck me.
That sounds like a title. Hey, bitch, tried breathing? Have
No,
you
literally
ever breathed?
No, there is a book. He does have a book that literally the title is like breathe or just breathe or something. And it's so interesting because people make breath work so complicated. And why I really resonate and love his work, one of the reasons why, is because it's just so simple. Like it's
Which
actually
is also infuriating.
which is so infuriating.
Someone being like, have you tried
breath work?
breath?
But you know what I mean? Like I felt like in order to like do breath work, I had to like understand all these different ways to do breath work. But actually you can just fucking breathe through your nostrils, you know? Yeah.
17 in, 47
No,
out.
I
Hold
can't.
the breath at the top,
No.
now at the bottom. Bring the pelvis in while the diaphragm comes up into the lungs 16 times.
I'm going to save that for my own pleasure practice because I do some crazy breath work when I'm masturbating.
Oh.
I have like really, and I will get back to my point if I remember it.
Wait,
but
let's go back to the
I have the point. I have the point.
breath work masturbation strategy.
Maybe we do need that as a podcast episode because this is something I've been exploring. Like I do notice when I can really like breathe into like the rise of like the peak of like you're about to like come your face off. If you can like really like breathe into that and also keep your mouth shut. Like everyone listening, try orgasming with no mouth breathing and just nasal breathing and let me know if it hits deeper. I've also been meditating and trying to like visualize my G spot while doing nasal breathing and like connecting the nasal breathing to the G spot. And I feel like the G spot is now showing itself to me as this like internal multiverse, but that is for another episode. What I was going to say about Buddhism was, and something that I learned and really struck me was like, okay, so there is an addiction to suffering and recreating suffering, which, you know, as a white woman sitting here, like, who the fuck am I to talk about suffering surrounded by stuffed animals in my comfortable, like, flannel robe? But also, I think it's just something important to consider. Like, if there is a collective addiction to suffering and recreating the suffering in each of our own lives, how are we doing that at different intersections of privilege and access? And I think if you're listening to this, then you have the space to consider that. You know, how am I recreating suffering? Where am I addicted to recreating suffering in my life? What am I doing on a daily basis that is contributing to my own suffering? That's my responsibility to not even like take care of, but just like notice and be like, oh, I could like just make some art from this. And that makes me want to say, what if we start approaching self care as art and ritual, which is a thesis of my work? Like, what if self care can be artistic and ritualistic and it doesn't have to be this like Wim Hof breath work and I get up and I ice plunge? Do not ever tell me to take an ice bath. I will punch you.
But I think a lot of people do approach self-care with ritual. I mean, like even people washing their face has its own ritual to it. And I think self-care is inherently ritualistic.
But also, how often do we in those moments, because I have noticed this, especially when I had, and I mean, I still struggle with skin stuff, but when I was dealing with like painful cystic acne all over my fucking face, I had to really notice. This was like also around one of my spiritual awakenings where I was like, I am the one who has my thoughts. Like I have, I have
That's an
control.
imperfect. That's a perfect impression of you. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I can see where I was standing in my kitchen when like the black mold and like the cannabis tincture just like hit right in the right moment. And I was like, I literally was like, I am God and I am the one who has my thoughts. And we are all God and we all have our own thoughts and we are these supercomputers and we are our higher selves. But then when I started to notice, like started noticing my thoughts, like just in every moment as a psychotic self-care practice, I would really have to be aware of when I was washing my face, like what was my internal dialogue as I was touching my own skin? Because that can be a ritual, right? It can be like, oh, just a ritual that you do. I mean, rituals can be dark, from the darkest of dark to the lightest of light. So it's like, what kind of ritual are we doing? What are we thinking? What are we imprinting? What are we putting into our coffee and our cacao when we're making it? What are we saying to ourselves when we touch our body, when we brush our teeth? All these things we have to do. We might as well be more conscious when we're doing them. I do catch myself daily when I'm washing my face. That is a true moment where I'm like, what's my fucking internal dialogue right now?
Yeah, I think that life is very mundane
Yeah.
and very repetitive. So we have all these things that are repetitive and like brushing your teeth, washing your face, taking a shower, yada yada. And those are all opportunity for ritualistic self-care. And it really depends on you how you approach it. Like self-care doesn't have to be commodified. Self-care doesn't have to be inaccessible. Self-care doesn't have to be someone teaching you.
Mm-hmm.
It's you going through the practice of your day with a ritualistic intention and having, I mean, I think that's what it's like, this mindfulness concept, you know, that again, I mean, we're always going back to Buddhism because Buddhism as a philosophy, I think, is really right on. You know, a lot of wisdom in Buddhism, but this
And I think it's
concept,
genuinely like helped both of us heal from some like pretty life-threatening illnesses, like in a
absolutely.
real way. Like we're not just like Buddhism and like you should try. It's like no, like this I think both of us approaching that practice came from a place of like, okay, I'm either going to like continue to deteriorate or I'm going to choose a new timeline.
Yeah.
Like in a very serious way.
No, my health had to be very threatened
Yeah.
for me to be as committed.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Goddess bless my
Goddess
health
bless.
problems. The one thing I wanted to say to going back to this concept, because I think that what's interesting about this current here now timeline is this, again, this push and pull, this tug of war around information overload and complete refusal to take in data
Which is still information overload of your own
of your own
information.
psyche. So one of the things that I think along this topic, and I feel this a lot, is what right do I to indulge in my own suffering or focus on my suffering when there's so much external suffering, right? And to what extent is it my responsibility to enjoy life and to like whatever privilege I have as being a white woman in America, like it is my it is a privilege I'm experiencing. So if I'm just gonna sit around and like, oh, like it's almost like there's this conversation around it is dishonoring to not enjoy your life if you are have these privileges. You are like not honoring the gifts you've been given, which is not helping the vibration. And the immense guilt one feels either enjoying their life or not enjoying their life. You know, either way, when you are recognizing privilege, the companion to privilege is guilt. And I think that's why so many people reject the concept of white privilege or American privilege, Western privilege, all of these things is because that they don't know how to manage the guilt. So I think that managing guilt is a huge part of self-care.
And then I think there's also something I've witnessed where, like, specifically folks who I've watched go from this, like, apathetic or like self consumption to maybe, let's say, since 2020, having this moment of recognizing their white privilege, recognizing their privilege. I've just as a pattern tracker and just someone who's very curious, I've watched folks who were apathetic go to then having this awakening around their privilege and then using that not only as a tool of self-abuse but as a tool to abuse others with.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's one thing to recognize that privilege is real, it's another thing to digest and embody that, and then from a place of non-violence, yet again Buddhism, decide like, how do I want to work and wield this privilege? Because again, the guilt and the shame, like it just doesn't leave space for possibility. I think something else that we mentioned on the last episode that I just have been feeling like a beating drum, is this concept of nervous system regulation being glorified. And even in the word regulation, like it feels like there's a controlling of our nervous systems that we have to regulate, we have to control, versus what I know to be true about the animal body and why I think the whales can help us process what's happening is because the whales, I mean, I don't really know, I'm not going to speak for the whales, but for the animal body, you can't cut yourself off from what it is that you're feeling and find regulation. And I think if we take out nervous system regulation and we replace that with nervous system capacity and resilience, what's true about building capacity and resilience is you actually have to let yourself be a big enough vessel to have the full spectrum range of feelings without running from yourself, turning a sword against yourself, or running away from those feelings, to let the emotions and the energy and motion bring you from point A to point B. And it's not that the emotional explosion or the emotional tantrum is the revelation, but I think letting, and I know from studying the nervous system and using this in practice with myself and clients, like letting yourself go through that and feel it and like scream and weep or laugh or whatever you need to do, there is information on the other side, and simply letting yourself have that experience creates nervous system capacity. And then the regulation that we're seeking, which I think is to say parasympathetic state of rest and digest, sometimes can only happen after the body has been able to go through a sympathetic state of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and that there's intelligence in a sympathetic response, and that we need the whales aren't cutting themselves off from having an animal response. The tiger, like the an animal in the wild is not cutting itself off from whatever it needs to do for its own survival. So I think we need to really look at where are we cutting ourselves off from feeling and moving through the feeling and calling reactionary states problematic or less evolved because we think we're somehow better than the animal body and animal states, when actually I think the erasure of the animal body is what makes us dysregulated because we're trying to like do mind over matter, which we can't do.
I agree and challenge. Um, where I agree is the semantics that have been like completely co-opted, right? So you have another word that I hear all the time, like balance.
Mm-hmm.
We're always hearing balance and finding balance. And we, I think, even started off saying the word balance. And to me, balance is when you are balanced, you are dead. That's when you're going to be fully balanced. Otherwise, like I think there's always going to be flux and
Yeah.
flow and a
Yeah.
whoop and a whoa. I think that's part of being alive is imbalance. So the question is to me, how do I find peace knowing that there is going to be perpetual imbalance in my life and in my body and in my health and in my soul? And it's not attaching to the back to Buddhism, it's not attaching to the imbalance, one being good, one being bad, but just noticing, oh, I have more energy, I have less energy, you know, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that I wanted to challenge in the mind over matter concept, you know, again, is we see this all the time. There are people who seem very repressed and they internalize all their emotions. So, like, you might be around them and energetically they could be feeling like a complex universe of feelings, but they're presenting as neutral,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you have people who are like, ah, I'm feeling everything. and they're just feeling, and they're external processors. And as someone who's attracted a lot of external processors in my life, and me being an internal processor, I will say there is an extreme violence of an external processor at times.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they would say the same about how I sometimes withdraw, or like a silence I can have, where they're like, what the hell is she thinking? Or what's really going on with her? So the mind over matter is interesting, because also I think you and I both fundamentally do believe in mind over matter when it comes to all sorts of health things. Like if you have your mind connected to like, my skin, my skin is so bad, versus like, my skin is so wonderful, I'm so grateful for it. That is a mind over matter experience that we definitely agree on. But like, the mind over matter being like, oh, you shouldn't tell yourself what to feel or not to feel, or how to express it. Like, I think that's kind of like the muddy waters, where I'm not a hundo that like feeling everything and expressing everything completely is emotional maturity. Sometimes I'm like, that is so annoying, and I actually wish you would not do that.
I deeply resonate with what you're saying, and I think it makes me think about the way that expressing your feelings all the time to everyone around you isn't self-care. That's not a self-care practice.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to speak to, like,
Let's maybe find a specific example.
Wait. Just let me
Yeah.
respond to this thought. So having a self-care practice that is like, this is a container that I'm creating to have my feelings, whether that be a shake where you're like, in this shake right now, in this somatic shake, I'm going to have all my feelings. I can scream, I can cry, I can weep, I can laugh, I can be small, I can be big. I am in my agency and in my self responsibility. I am going to create this space for myself to have these feelings, so that I don't like dump and pour all over the place in my life, because I need a container to have these feelings. I also think that when it comes to the mind, like in like a somatic space, we would say like there's no separation between the mind and the body, and the mind is just constantly mapping onto the body, and then the body is like reinforming the mind. So then I think it's like, okay, what do we mean when we say the mind? And I think so many people listening would have a different experience of what the mind is. And I feel like we're both referencing the mind, again, from a Buddhist perspective, as like larger than the brain.
Right. The mind
Right?
is part of your antenna to consciousness.
Yes.
Universal.
That just feels like important clarification, because I know what you're saying and we know what we're saying, but
because the other, thing that came up when you were talking about like the shake, for example. So I'm a shaker. I do shaking all the time. Like that's part of my practice. However, I'm going to be real with you. I don't feel too much when I shake, because it's not in the moment. I'm actually just like, oh, it's 2:30, I have time to do a shake, or it's part of my ritual or my self-care, but I'm not like, oh my god, I'm feeling all of these feelings right now, I gotta go do a shake.
that's
No,
your
it's
Venus Aquarius.
yeah. So I mean, like,
My Venus Pisces is like shaking, and I'm like, ah!
but I
It's
get,
why I weep on psychedelics and you don't.
I do not.
You're like the landscape, and I'm like, my deep internal grief.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. But it's like, I guess my what I'm trying to say is like, when I'm doing a quote unquote self-care ritual, I'm not personally necessarily tapping into feelings that I'm feeling in that moment, because usually when I have the time and energy to do a self-care ritual, I'm okay. It's not, I'm very rarely like in the moment of total chaos and like, oh, I'll be right back, I'm just going to do an hour shake, like I'm actually just living the chaos. And so I guess like what I
Meanwhile, I'm like running to my tarot deck, like, like jacking off my tarot deck. That's actually so funny. I'm like, and then I'm like fingering all the cards, and I'm like, I lick each card.
cunnilingus to the cards.
Tarot card cunnilingus is hilarious.
That is a vibe. So I think like what I'm referencing maybe is, if your nervous system is on the fritz, you're going to be more reactionary.
On the Fritz.
On the Fritz.
I'm thinking about that song, On the Ritz. Dun 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 dun.
The musical?
Dun 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 dun. Know that song?
Yeah. But I know what you're talking about.
Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
So, but like, if your nervous system is frayed,
Yeah.
you're going to be more reactionary in moments of chaos.
Yeah, you have no
And
capacity.
yes, and if your nervous system is more supported, a moment of chaos will happen and it doesn't mean you're necessarily like in that reactionary state. So, I think like to like merge our 2 points is that sometimes I mean like, and I think this would be echoed in a lot of my observations of like indigenous cultures who intentionally do very painful ceremony in order to build nervous system resiliency. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, there is a human practice that has been going on for thousands of years where you consciously and consensual, well, I mean, consent is kind of hard because you're having adults make children do it. So, I actually, let's take consent out of it. It's not consensual, but there has been the history of human tradition where adults um do rituals with children for children and I also for themselves, it's not just that, but you go through rites of passage in order to build nervous system resiliency, so when you are in moments of nervous system quote unquote challenge, then you have the imprint and the blueprint to be like, oh yes, I've felt extreme anxiety before.
And I didn't die.
I didn't die. I can act in a way that is calm, even though I'm acknowledging I feel extreme anxiety in this here now moment. And I guess that this is what we're talking about, is that self-care isn't just like always soft and easy and calm, because
Or
that,
pretty.
or pretty, because life isn't that. And I think it's a blend of, I think a lot of times like quote unquote masculine self-care of the extreme, like you mentioned, like you don't want to do a cold bath. It's not
Only
just
follicular.
it's not just cold bath,
So I wait.
like harsh.
I feel like we're peak. I just intuitively feel like we're screaming again.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like self-care isn't just harsh and it isn't just soft. It has to be both.
Yeah. Sorry, we just don't want to peak the audio. We're like a 2-woman production here, and the amount of times we did things for the mic and Tony got up to set the camera and we opened the blinds and closed the blinds. I mean, it is, y'all. And then this gets edited together. You think there's an editor?
No. No.
Come on.
I wish someone did something
But
for me. Yeah.
I mean, talk about creating capacity, though. This is where, and again, I recognize that I say this from a place of my own privilege, but I have made the choice to see everything I've experienced and my complex trauma from the lens of, wow, my soul must have been so brave to say yes to like coming into this family line. And if everything's already all happened and it's just this moment, like, wow, what an agreement to say yes to all of that, to expand my capacity and range and like get curious about what happened to me and why I am the way that I am, which I genuinely believe is why I can hold a deep space for myself and others.
Mm.
Because I think people experience me as a quote unquote safe space, which is a whole other conversation that we can have.
Yeah.
Because ultimately I am a safe space for myself. Not all the time. Like there's many times, even this morning, there was something I was feeling anxious about at breakfast. And I was like, I just want to share this with you, Tony, so you can like put some prayers out for me about this, because I'm still in like a mind heart prison around this thing that I'm processing. Like I actually am having a hard time holding this by myself. Like, will you hold it with me? But I'm not like, hold this for me. It's like
This
I'm
is
holding this and I'm
such a-
self-aware. Like,
this
please
is-
help me hold this. Self-care is community care.
I love this point as the difference, and that is so true. I mean, like, it almost makes me want to cry, which is so strange. I never cry.
Oh.
But there was a feeling
Flattered.
yeah, there's a feeling of tears could happen
Yeah.
at this concept of like not giving. It's not like you take a dump in your hand and you're like, hold my shit. It's like, I have a dump in my hand. Can we hold hands?
Yeah.
And then someone is like, yes, I consent to holding hands with you. And it's kind of interesting, like when I think of when someone tells me, some personal information about themselves that like I normally am kind of judgmental about, like whatever it is, if I have a propensity to be judgmental about what they're about to tell me, but they tell me in a way where they're like feeling really bad and guilty about it and they're feeling like horrible about themselves, like usually where I would guilt and shame you behind your back in my own mind, if they're doing that to themselves, all I want to do is make them feel better.
Yeah. Well, because
All I want to do.
there's like,
The
it's the self-awareness.
self-awareness.
I think it's the self-awareness that creates the spaciousness between I am sharing what's happening for me and I'm dumping it on top of you. And I have defined on this podcast and in my life many times narcissism as a lack of self-awareness. And I think that self awareness and that narcissism spectrum, because I actually really don't believe that some people are just narcissists and other people are not. I think narcissism to self awareness is a spectrum that we're all on all the time. And to think that some of us are, I think some of us do, well, this goes back to also like, where is our source point? Like, where is the source point in your nervous system that you're operating from? What is your current blueprint? I do think that some folks exist in more of a narcissistic paradigm and other folks don't, but that's not to say that that couldn't change based on life experiences and imprints and, whatever. So I guess what I want to say is like our source point and like our blueprint is malleable and we have the option to change our blueprint. And also something I'm gonna like really just come back to is like, if you self-identify as a child of the divine and you believe that everyone else is also divine and you believe that you're having this sovereign experience in this human body and everyone else is also having their own experience, all of it, to me at least, like when I started really practicing that in mind, body, and heart, like everything just felt a little less like threatening, a little less scary, a little less separate.
So let's take that point and go back to the origin of this, which is self-care in a careless world.
I just cracked my heart.
Oh.
Yeah, like front and back of my heart just cracked.
I didn't know a heart could crack.
No, it
You mean like your sternum?
like it went.
Wait, watch out for your titties. So when I think of this concept, I mean, we talk a lot about what was happening.
I was giving myself a breast massage on live camera.
Wait, but that today might come out.
Also okay. Breast massage. Oh, just a little. How often are we like rubbing ourselves down?
I think we should talk about our self-care rituals to end.
Yeah.
But what I want to talk
about masturbating.
Which is self-care. But what did I want to talk about? Wait, what was I saying? Oh yeah, it's like self-care as community care and self-care. And what is your community? Your community isn't just your family. The community is also your citizenship to the world. It's deeper than just. Oh, Sarah, if you can't see this, Sarah is now having cunnilingus from a teddy bear.
I was sitting like that the whole time.
No, it was an activation.
It was just in my puss the whole time.
So self-care as community care, self-care as familial care, what exactly does that mean? And it means, I observe this all the time, I think, with parents. When you have a really low capacity for yourself, your capacity for your kid is going to be very low.
Oh, God.
And so that is why, it's funny, like, how important it is for mothers to get breaks, how important it is for mothers to take space, how important it is for mothers to take vacations, how important it is for mothers to spend time on their own as individuals, to remember who they are besides the role of mother. So all of these ways in which I think society, because of capitalism, because of our relationship to money, because of our relationship to work, we sacrifice our energy and we don't allow that energy for self-care, because self-care actually does take energy. It's not just laying on the couch and relaxing. That is just part of self-care.
Yeah.
It's not, I would almost argue it's a small part. I think a lot of self-care is action-based.
Yeah.
Genuine self-care is you doing something. And yes, you have to just sometimes lay down.
Choice. Making a choice.
Making a choice to have the time to do it.
I think this is something people also get confused about. And I was also very confused about this um, until I started investigating it, which is we don't always actually need to downregulate. Sometimes we need to upregulate. And I think that changes all the time. Like, do we need the down regulation of laying down, or do we actually need to upregulate and go like do a plank and like feel our belly button and core burn?
Yeah, and work the body. Yeah.
And that's where I feel like when we're approaching self-care as art and ritual, it's like, okay, from my like intergalactic interdimensional artist and witch lens, what does this human need right now? And I do sort of sometimes do this thing where I'm like, okay, if I believe I'm my higher self and everyone else is their higher self, and the higher self is like this guardian angel for this human body, this animal body, and this human experience, and a steward of consciousness, like moving through the blood, bones, and tissues, then to like resource and that aspect of our consciousness and be like, what does all of this need right now? And to know that like we don't like have to know, like we don't have to automatically know. Sometimes we do need to check in, like do a check in and see. But I think because white supremacy is so addicted to competency and perfectionism, we can almost get caught in that moment of like deciding how do I care for myself right now. And I do hear a lot of people talking about that like in my life, and I also relate to that where it's like, okay, I need something right now but I'm unclear of what I need, and then getting dysregulated by not knowing what to do or how to care in the moment, especially if you're like overstimulated.
And I kind of want to go back to this concept of having the energy or the chi to
Mm-hmm.
be a community member, because that is important. Like, it is important that you have the energy to be a community member. And the one thing I know is that energy comes from energy. So if you have like a very sedentary existence, that is going to keep kind of pulling you into that ethos. And if you're have like a very hyper existence, where you're always like moving, that can that also could be too distracting for you to be like an involved community member. So even though the word balance is an impossibility, I think what we're really looking for is fluctuation and
Mm-hmm.
having some self-awareness about what is your propensity. So my propensity is excessive movement and going hard. So for me personally, I have to spend special attention on like, where am I soft? Where am I relaxing? Where am I doing less? I have to pull back from what is natural to me in order for me to take the time and have the energy to do the community care. Because for me personally, that is just, I have to look at my opposite in order to nurture it. And I think that's what everyone kind of has to do, is keep looking at what their opposite propensity is. And that is what we must nurture in order to find that flow and that fluctuation to be um to be most advantageous for yourself and others. I think the others is a huge part of self-care. If we're motivated to just do self-care for the self, how lonely and boring. But to do self-care so you can show up for others and for yourself, that feels like so much more juicy.
Yeah. I mean, we're recording this during Aquarius season, and I feel like that's such an Aquarian code. It's like, how do I need to take care of this supercomputer of the self and like
And
update the
why is it a
software system?
supercomputer?
I just feel like Aquarius is very like beep boop bop, digital, air,
But do
technology.
you feel like a supercomputer?
Well, I'm just using that as like I mean, we could call ourselves like a radio receiving signals. Like I feel like, or a vessel receiving the water of consciousness and information flowing through us.
Hmm.
Supercomputer and like software codes and like programs and like giving software updates just always sort of takes my mind over anytime we enter Aquarius season, like as the metaphor I'm operating from.
Operating.
Also, I did just get Tony the Sophia Code as a gift, and I'm excited for you to read that because I think we do need to talk about that. Kaya Ra also uses a lot of that. language in the book and I resonate with it. Not that I like want to be a computer, but you know what I mean. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So something that I have noticed in my personal practice is exactly what you said, which is like if I wake up in the morning and I'm like, man, I really don't want to like do my meditation right now. I really don't want to move. I really don't want to. But then I'm going to like make a video or make content or have a session with a client or go teach a class or try to be a partner or a friend. And I haven't had that time to check in. Like my propensity is to mask. Like I don't like become a demon to everyone around me, but I will like mask what is actually happening and I will override my emotional body, which tends to make me sick every time. Like I actually need space to empty out every morning. And every night, really. Like I need a lot of time in my self-care cave. And I think something that fundamentally shifted my nervous system was doing my 500-hour trauma informed yoga teacher, mindfulness and meditation training where I had to create a yin nest for as a very yang bitch over here. As a very hyper vigilant motherfucker. I had to create a yin nest every Sunday for like 10 hours a day for over a year
Mm.
and like lay on in that fucking nest and do a bajillion thousand yoga nidras and then journal what came up for me and pour it out through the writing to create a new baseline. Bless you. Like I had to get stuff out of me, information. I had to empty the trash of my desktop in order to actually have space. You know, in the computers, like you actually can't do a software upgrade right now because you don't have enough storage.
Yeah.
That happens to me a lot on my actual computer. And I'm like, where is the technology mirroring back to me? What is happening with me? Because someone who's not clearing out their computer storage is probably also not clearing out their emotional storage.
Um, so one of the things that's coming up for me is like, so sometimes I don't want to do something. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that thing or whatever. You know, I don't want to move my body. I don't want to do that. And then I do, I override that. And then I actually feel really good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I did that. And sometimes I override that and I feel less, but I have overridden and I feel depleted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I think is really important is developing a genuine relationship with your intuition so you can tell the difference between like, will this, like, you know, like,
Tell them about the falling forwards and falling backwards.
okay, so I learned this practice. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are into muscle testing. So this is a muscle testing practice that I learned from this woman who I think learned it from her grandmother.
Sick.
But it's a type of muscle testing. So she would close her eyes and she just says the word yes over and over again. And for me personally, when I did that, yes to me was forward. And then when I said the word no, no for me was back. But you have to figure out what
Like
it is for yourself.
you're standing on your
you're
feet.
standing on your feet and you say the word yes, you see which way you lean. You say the word no, you see which way you lean. For me, it's forward and back.
Same.
And so basically, anytime I don't know,
Like yes is forward and no is back
no
for
is
you.
back.
But for someone else, no could be forward and yes could be back.
I think that would be strange, but it could be
Yeah.
possible, or left and right.
Yeah.
But you have to figure it out, and it only works through practice. But let's say I'm making breakfast, and I'm like, do I want eggs or do I want kale? You know, or whatever. Well,
I mean,
both. But if I'm having a hard time making a decision, it could be a decision about a supplement, it could be a decision about something I'm doing. Should I go for a walk or should I read? If I just like,
should I post a video or not post
should I
a
post
video?
a video? Should I not post a video? I do this all the time when I'm just not clear. I just close my eyes and ask the question and see which way I lean, and I just trust it. Should I go to this show or not go to this show? Should I say yes to this event that I got asked to go to or no? I just I ask my body. So I have this continual practice that I truly do every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, depending on how many decisions I have to make, where I ask my body what I want to do. because I'm not sure my mind always knows what I want to do. Because I think that's the thing, is that our minds are very convoluted. The one thing I'm sure about my mind is that it is a caca-fest garbage heap. And most of the things that I think are complete poo-poo, and they're boring, and they're self-destructive, and they're repetitive, and they're cyclical. Like, my thoughts are, if you were to watch a movie in my thoughts, you would ask for your money back. 2% of my thoughts have any value to anyone, including myself or others. And that is the nature of the mind. So, always thinking that my mind is going to know what's best for me is incorrect. And so, I have this practice of like trying to not ask my mind, but ask my body slash intuition. Because I think the body and the intuition are really deeply connected more than the brain and the intuition.
Okay, the goddess is asking me to ask you this question for all the folks at home. So, as someone who has a robust self care practice and spiritual practice, and as someone who is deeply invested in being aware of what's happening with global events, how do you hold space for both of for that information within you? Like, what is your practice around that?
Okay, so I think what happened for me personally is there was a moment of complete and utter heartbreak, of learning what the world actually is, what politics actually is, what the financial system actually is, what the nonprofit industrial complex actually is. Like, learning the genuine dysfunction of all of these systems and all of these people that uphold these systems. My heart was broken. And I think that was a deeper heartbreak, than a man or a friend or even my parents could ever have created, because it was a shattering of everything you think to be true. So that is real. And when that happens, there is, I think, an obsessive kind of thinking that takes place. I mean, I remember just like the overconsumption of like, oh my goddess, like what is actually happening? And I think I had to let go of the arrogance of thinking I would ever know. I'm never gonna know. I can only have theories. And the only thing I can know for sure is what my gut instinct says. So if I am going, it's like something happens in the news. This happens all the time, where I am presented with a story, a fact, quote unquote. I actually do not seek out other people's opinions on these facts, quote unquote. I just sit with myself and I say, what do I actually feel and think? So I try to steer clear actually from opinion, and just get in as much information, and then gather that information in terms of what I already know in my gut and in my instinct and in my like deepest self to be true, which is why a lot of times when a quote unquote news story happens, the first reaction I have is like, how is this being spun? I think that is always a question I ask. And who is to gain? So, long story very long, I think it's like letting yourself feel the genuine heartbreak, and then moving towards a deep humility that you will actually never know, and being open to the fact that what's most important is the actions you take, not what you think you know to be true.
Yeah. What I'm reflecting on is how cortisol inducing taking in high sensation information is,
Mm.
and how, as someone who's really dealt with a cortisol addiction that's wrecked my mind, body, nervous system time and time again, the way that it really is addictive. And also that moment of like the heartbreak and the heart, like I would say, like, is the heart actually breaking, or is it expanding to receive like more information from the cosmos, because the heart is a translator? And like, I also had a moment of like, it was very specifically in grad school for me, and like starting to practice witchcraft and study feminism for the first time, and like really let myself have my own experience of politics separate from my parents or my friends. I actually didn't really have a lot of friends at that time, so it was like pretty alone. And so
Mm.
I was also receiving a lot of information and then being like, how do I feel about this? But there was a moment of this like cracking open. I do think you have to kind of like lose your mind for a minute. Like, and
Mhm.
that's a common thread, I think, for so many people. Like, so many like dear friends of mine, mentors, allies, teachers in my life, um, there's this shared experience of like it cracks your brain open to have to like open, for lack of a better term, to like a new paradigm and a new way of thinking, and to know that like from AOC to Donald Trump, no one is coming to save you, and everyone has their own agenda. And yeah.
What made me think of self care within that concept is how we can be also very extremist about our self care. I know I've done this in the past where, like orthorexia, where you're just like, I have to only eat healthy food. And I was a raw foodist for a couple of years and I would only eat raw organic vegetables and da 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 da. And that vibration was actually not self care. The
Oh.
way I was approaching it was not self care. So you can take things that are like healthy and you can turn them very violent.
Oh my God.
And I have definitely done that to myself.
Hundo P.
So I think a lot of times there is an extremism to self care that is very dangerous. And it's almost like I remember I saw like a meme of like a starter pack, like a self care starter pack is like all the healthiest stuff, like where it begins and then where it ends is just like a pack of cigarettes, which is like
Relatable.
very relatable because A, tobacco is a wonderful plant, it's just been co opted, and B, it really is the relationship we have to anything. It's like you can have a very unhealthy relationship to food and eat quote unquote healthy food, or you could have a very healthy relationship to food, but you're not eating in a particularly healthy way. And what is better?
Something that I channeled the other day for my membership, and then someone gave me some reflection background because I was like, is this dumb? Why am I receiving this way? But she was like, wow, this is so helpful and like really empowering. So I'm going to share it here. Is we don't always have to like be trying to like develop new practices and like add them to our repertoire. Like so many of us, we already know what works for us. And the vision I kept receiving when I was channeling around self-care the other day was this like spiritual like Rolodex, or this like self-care Rolodex like you'd go through to get people's like emails and phone numbers. And like we all have that from this lifetime, from past lives. We all have access to all of our Akashic records, to all of our information, to everything that's happened and ever will happen. I truly believe we all have access to that. So I think there can also be a hyper fixation on, I need to learn this new modality, this new tool, this new thing, which is great, right? Like, yes to learning, and yes to enriching our lives. And also, what do you already know works for you? And
Mm-hmm.
like, are you resisting doing that because you're addicted to recreating suffering and cortisol?
Mm-hmm.
And I ask you that because those are questions I have to ask myself every day, because I am addicted to recreating suffering in my life because of my suffering that I've survived, and also the cortisol. So self-care can also be really simple.
Yeah, and it makes me think. Okay, so I have a meditation practice. I've had a meditation practice since my 20s. It's a non-negotiable for me. It is something I do. And I have a kid. And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't have time in the morning because of my kid or kids." Granted, I only have one kid. So I don't know what it's like to have kids, but I will tell you that 100% you can prioritize yourself if you have like a need. Your kid or kids can understand. Like
Yeah.
I am just they understand because but what you have to do is humanize yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember so distinctly like and if you have a partner, that partner has to also support you. So yes, it's harder if you're a single parent and you have no support. That is going to be harder. Or if you have a partner who's a doinkus and doesn't support you. But the more you humanize yourself, the more your kid humanizes you. And the amount of times my kid has to understand that, like, I'm meditating and she's just going to wait 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, wherever I'm at, that is a part of her life that she does not question. Like, so if we have something to do in the morning, she understands that, like, my meditation practice is part of my morning. Every Christmas morning, she woke up and I still meditated.
Yeah.
I still meditate, and that was still part of like my practice, and that was understood and respected because I respected it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing that, like, I see with women, I see with mothers a lot, is their families like either distract them from their potential practices or are a perfect excuse not to explore the potential practice, or they genuinely feel oppressed and then they can't do the practice, and that's also annoying. And I guess I just want to remind everyone that, like, you can build that into your life and into your family, and your children can respect it. If you respect it and you honor it, they will as well. And if they're not, like, that is indicative of a greater issue that needs to be addressed, which is your humanity within your family and your personhood.
Well, because we slurp it up anyways, right? Like, I think I'm pretty damn good at like tidying and cleaning and keeping my house in like a state of sacredness because my mom was really good at that. Like, she was really good at cleaning and creating a comfortable space and all the blankets. Like, we would come in from, being out all day at school or whatever, and she'd be like, before you sit down for dinner, like, go put on your comfies, like, go put on your comfy clothes. Like, she really had like a strong sense of like this is important, and it was pretty much like she always worked out and stuff too, but like that was her, very much so, her self-care practice was like keeping this space in the home. So I slurped that up.
Yeah.
And honestly, like Max, my partner, would vouch for this. Like when we have been in some like intense moments of fighting, the quickness with which I will start cleaning and organizing and folding clothes is so funny. You can see it, can't you? We're like
Yeah.
we're like in it and we're fighting, and
Oh,
I'm
I
like,
just start
and
cleaning.
he's a Gemini. He wants to talk about it. He's got Aquarius moon and rising, so he's thinking, he wants to talk. He's a verbal processor. I actually need time, and this is now something that we understand more about each other, so we can like respect and hold space for each of our processes that we need within high sensation. I actually go nonverbal, and I need to go inside of myself to like understand what it is that I'm feeling.
Mm.
And I use cleaning and
Yeah.
organizing. I don't think I'm like the only woman who does that. It's like a unique thing, but I do notice that. And I've multiple times been like, wow, this is something I totally slurped up from my mom. And like, yes, this is an efficient way to like exercise this energy. And also like she prayed, and that was a part of her practice, so I think that also is a part of why my prayer practice is strong. But there were so many things that she didn't do, and I'm not blaming her, I'm just like reflecting. There's so many ways she didn't create space for herself, and she actually had this narrative, and to this day I think still struggles with this around like, well, I put everyone else in front of me, and I'm going to put everyone else first.
And what a recipe for resentment.
Right. And so I have to really watch that in myself when it comes to like using other people or how busy I am as my excuse to not take care of myself in a way where I wasn't given the codes to do so. Like a lot of us are self-generating this from scratch, and like God is bless.
But also, I do think you're reflecting back is that where your mom did prioritize a certain kind of self-care,
Yeah,
that translated to you,
it
and we
did.
do live through example, we learn through example. So I think that my, like, devotional meditation practices that my kid has had to witness, I mean, when we were in Scotland for a month and I would have to shake every single day
The amount of days I woke up to Tony flip-flopping.
and shaking around. And my kid, she's so funny about it. She was like, "Oh, there goes my mom shaking to her Indian music again." But it's like, I do think it's healing for the both of us. And she just has to watch her mom jiggle wiggle, for a whole hour sometimes. I think that's healing for her. But the other thing I wanted to say, and as a parent I understand what it is to have to prioritize your kid and your partner, your family, or blah blah blah. Like I'm often prioritizing other people. I would say, like, it's funny. I have a friend who she says to me a lot. She's like, I don't do anything I don't want to do. She's single, no kids. So she's like, I truly do not do anything I don't want to do. And I'm like, always like, I do 90% of my life is things I don't want to do. I'm like, I don't even know what I want to do. I'm always doing things I don't want to do. So there is, like, obviously,
I only want to go to dance class.
I do go to, yeah.
I only want to go. And sometimes I don't even want to dance. So then I'm fucked.
But this is something that's really helped me as someone who lives with a lot of quote unquote obligation, because I have a lot of obligation, and I think a lot of us have a lot of obligation, is the way I handle that in order not to build resentment and to not have, like, feel as if I'm doing everything for everyone else or people are stealing my time from me,
Mm.
is every time I do something, I remind myself I am choosing to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I am choosing. And that reminder really helps me. It's like if someone asks me to do a favor and I'm a people pleaser, recovering and still experiencing people pleasing, so both. I think you can be both. I'm way better than I was. But there's often times when someone asks, this happened to me the other day, like a friend came over, I really did not want them to. But we had plans and I felt like too awkward canceling the plans because I don't like a cancel planner, a plan canceler. So I was like, okay. And so she came over and I just reminded myself I chose this. Like, I could have said the uncomfortable, which is I actually don't feel like having you come over. And I didn't do that. So I am choosing this. So therefore I'm not going to resent this person for being here when I made the choice. And if I have to give my kid a seventh billionth ride to gymnastics, I just remind myself, like, these are a series of my own choices. I chose to sign her up. I chose to have her. I chose to do this. Like, I'm choosing to bring her gymnastics because I'm choosing to prioritize her commitment to gymnastics, even though it's annoying for me. So I think that agency helps me personally really deal with resentment. And that is a big part of my self-care, is not building resentment for anyone in my life, because resentment is a plaque on the heart, and it's really, I think, the most toxic ingredient to a relationship. So the more agency I have and take, and the more personal responsibility I take, the less I resent. And that is a big part of my self-care practice.
Yes. And something I'm hearing you say that I deeply resonate with is choosing the lens and consciousness that you see your life and your experience through is also self care. Consciousness lenses are self-care, and like I'm just going so tech on this, but we can change the lens on the camera, right? Like we get to choose. And ultimately I do think it breaks down to this: are we seeing through a lens of love, or are we seeing through a lens of fear?
Mm.
Period. Like you're either in love or you're in fear. And I really think that it is that didactic when it comes to like just simplifying all of the full spectrum and range of emotions. And that really helps me because I can be feeling all of the things. Like I can be feeling grief and anger, and I can still see through a lens of love. And like, how do we hold these emotions that our culture has demonized and made scary for us? Like, I think a lot of times it's been unsafe to feel grief, it's been unsafe to feel anger. So to be a safe space to have those feelings, and then on top of that to choose to see that through a lens of love, can be really empowering. And then it also brings me to one of my big self-care practices, which is in the same way I see myself and all people as children of the divine, and that ultimately we are our higher selves that I believe have come from galaxies and dimensions from across the multiverse, and we all just have different information that we're here to share, and we chose to come to planet Earth to have this human experience. What I've received from my teachers is that life is a mystery school and class is always in session. So, what does it mean to be in Earth School, where part of what we're learning is how to be human while not cutting off our connection to the divine, and ultimately leaving planet Earth and all people and animals and creatures and plants better than we found them? And that sounds so noble, but to truly in all moments be like, okay, like I'm waking up in the mystery school today. I'm gonna have assignments. Like maybe within these lessons like are my blessings, and maybe like this block that feels like sludge is actually a portal to my peace and power and a more multidimensionally expressed version of myself. The lens of the mystery school saves me daily. It really does. It'll get me to do stuff I really don't want to do. I'm like, all right, my assignment right now in the mystery school is to do these dishes. I'm gonna do that. It's all Hogwarts.
Um, yeah, and I think to close,
I mean, is there any other self-care practices you
I
want to
almost
really
think we
speak
should
to?
share our self-care
Yeah, I think
practices
that's
on the
right.
Patreon. Yeah, because we've been wanting to share some things there. So we should share that
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
if you join our Patreon, we're going to share our self-care practices because I do have a lot I could share
Yeah, we got
and
to
give
get the
some
gnarly
advices.
we got to get the gnarly people Patreon poppin'. Like we
Yeah.
have so many projects we're working on at the same time right now, individually and collectively, that it's sometimes hard to figure out where to pour the water, but that does feel like a really important space for all of us. And so we want to create that with you. And I this episode was actually not only inspired by Tony's incredible title of self-care in
Careless world.
Careless World, but also based on someone asking us about like how do we, I forget the exact question, but it was something like how do you move through like big emotions and big sensations in the body. And I know that's something people are curious about. So
Wait, there was something I wanted to say before we close, and now, hold on a second. You were talking about the mystery school. Oh yeah, wait. It's like our responsibility in learning information about the world is to motivate us to be the most evolved community members we could possibly be.
yeah.
And I think that when we use the information about the world to be impotent and to be paralyzed, that is where the powerful overlords win, right? So we need to be informed in order to be motivated. You need to have an impulse in order to feel urgency. So let's not shun the urgency. The urgency is here and it is real, but what we want to make sure we allow for is the joy and the pleasure and the happiness of being an active community member that's involved in solutions, because ultimately we are community beings. We do want to hang out with other people. We do want to have a good time, and we could do all those things while being incredibly beneficial to society, each other, and the world.
And the urgency is just information. The
Yeah.
urgency is just information. It's not a threat to our safety. It's not a threat to our lives.
Well, to some safeties and some
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
A
But
lot of
like but I
people's
mean I
lives
mean
is
like I
safety.
mean like the information like and the high sensation of like receiving information from online. It can like feel life threatening. Like I felt so activated by the fires in LA. Like that was like, I mean, granted I was also bleeding, but I'm not in LA.
Yeah.
I have people I love that are there, but like I felt so personally activated by it. I did have to find in my practice, and like just when I say my practice also, I believe that we're kind of like always in our self-care practice, right? Like the practice is like every fucking moment and every breath and every thought and every word.
Yeah.
I had to be like, okay, Sarah, like you're not in danger right now. It feels like there
Yeah.
is like like alarm bells are going off, and that's like so natural based on what the eyes and brain just took in. But like,
You're not experiencing it.
right.
Therefore, you have the capacity to both witness this and to enjoy your life in order for you to be an active member within your own community. And I think that is the complexity that we keep being pulled from, is witnessing atrocities, having empathy, feeling like it's happening to you. It's not happening to you. It's not, actually. It's
Unless it
happening.
is.
If it's happening to you, you're not watching it, you're living it.
Yeah.
And I think
And
that
then you're also watching it
living it and
sometimes,
watching it
which
is a
is
different vibe.
fucking
But if you're
crazy.
just watching it, you have to remind yourself that, like, I am not living this. And so to act as if I'm living this is what they want, you know, what the overlords want. And so it's like we have to be able to be it's we said it earlier. We're not taking some we cannot take anyone else's shit, but we can hold their shitty hands.
Yeah.
So if you have the energy, you can hold someone's shitty hands. But if you have no energy, you're not gonna be able to lift your arms.
Yeah. And as we know, joy and pleasure and radical self expression on multidimensional levels is a revolutionary act of resistance. And Adrienne Marie Brown taught us all through pleasure activism the politics of feeling good. That feeling good is actually political and it is actually activism.
Yeah.
And we are here as earth angels to expand that capacity within ourselves, which then we can imprint into the world and our relationships and all that we say and do, because all of our relationships are an extension of our relationship with ourself and the divine.
Yeah, and learning about the world doesn't have to impact your ability to feel joy, because
We're big enough to hold
we're
both.
big enough to hold both. We're strong enough. We're strong enough to hold both and hold each other's shitty hands. All right, I think that's good enough for today.
Woo!
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, y'all. Love you. Subscribe to Patreon. All the links are in the description. Did you just? Oh, I thought you just. Oh,
I almost.
I'm just censored with the octopusy. You
Yeah.
censored the puss with the octopusy.
I did.
Okay.